What's up, visionary? I am Clee Davis, your vision actualization mentor. If this is your first time listening to the podcast, this show was designed to help you break down any barriers keeping you from building the vision you have for your life. And today, I'm going to be talking to the Crystal Berger. Crystal is a journalist for the Fox News channel. She's also a lifestyle feature host, producer, contributor, and author of the Be Extraordinary podcast. She has been featured on Fox News Channel, of course, the Dr. Oz Show, Trinity Broadcasting Network, Black Enterprise Magazine, so many other different places. The list can go on and on. She's interviewed the likes of Ray Lewis to Trey Songz to Ricky Smiley to Jay Williams to Russell Westbrook. It's her lineup is crazy, and I talked to her today to get a little inside scoop on what exactly her story is and what her vision story process was like. And when I tell you, this story of hers is so inspiring, so uplifting, and so real and raw, telling you exactly what it takes to get to your vision and your dreams, man, it's so good. And I'm excited to share this episode with you guys today. Sonexa, our visionary profile, please.
Loading. Visionary profile. Crystal Berger. Hometown, West Baltimore, Maryland. Occupation, journalist, lifestyle feature host, producer, contributor, and author at Fox News. Billboard quote: surround yourself with purpose, on purpose, in order to live in your purpose. For weekly visionary value, subscribe to the show. Enjoy.
Born and raised in Baltimore, Maryland, West Baltimore, single parent family. Always knew very early on that I wanted to be a journalist. No question about it. As early as 15, I used to watch this show called Teen Summit. They used to come on BET, and the host there was Ananda Lewis, and I remember just watching her interviewing all of these amazing people from Tupac to Jada Pinkett Smith, just about our music and our culture. And I knew very early on that I wanted to be like her. I had no idea how to get into the media industry. So when I went to college, I majored in English with a minor in communications and education because the school that I went to didn't have a broadcast journalism program. So I ended up kind of going the roundabout way to getting to the end destination. And so I was on a career path of becoming an English teacher, even though I didn't want to be an English teacher. Like at the end of the day, I knew that I wanted to be a journalist. But again, it's one of those fields where your next door neighbor isn't a journalist. Like your next door neighbor may be a nurse or maybe a teacher, but they're not a journalist. And so I never had anybody in my direct community that could say, these are the steps to becoming a journalist. So for me, I ended up coming out of college with the English with the minor in communications and education. I taught high school for 2 years in Washington, D.C. And I was like, no, this is not it. This is not it. I love my babies, but this is not it. And so I ended up going to law school for a year.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Yeah, I went to law school for a year. Was in class with people who were 5th and 6th generation attorneys. They knew that that was what they wanted to do. Like they knew that they were passionate about the law. And I really was like, this ain't it, And so when I left law school, I was like, man, I was still kind of searching and trying to figure out how would I get to the proper destination. And so I started to pursue some entrepreneurial type efforts because I had a lot of background in contracts at this point. I knew a lot of professional athletes and a lot of guys were coming to me for different things like help with their media stuff. And so I would give them advice. I would help them out a little bit. And so I was like, well, maybe I can kind of flip this and turn this into a business. So I was taking a class with the entrepreneurs of Baltimore. Women entrepreneurs of Baltimore. And one day, a guy who I befriended had just started an online magazine, Dave Zake, one of my best friends to this day, ran in the class and said, Crystal, oh my God, I need somebody to go and interview some of the Baltimore Ravens tonight. And I was like, okay. Okay, I'll go. And so my very first interview ever was with Ray Lewis. Had no
Wow.
experience, I had no experience, no anything in the industry. I just went, I dressed up, looked really nice. All I knew is that women on TV or people on TV just look really good. And so I dressed up, went and did the interview. The interview was terrible, but it ended up getting like 80,000 hits on YouTube. And then I started to get calls from the other Ravens when they would have different charity events. So Terrell Suggs with his sickle cell awareness events and things like that. And so I was like, man, like this is really like what I want to do. Like I would be in my zone, even though I didn't really know what I was doing. I knew it's what I wanted to do. And so, long story short, one day I was interviewing someone on site. A gentleman used to play for the Ravens named Daniel Strickland. Yeah, I do believe his name was Dan Strickland. And one of my girlfriends came and she was like, B, this is your zone. And she and I have been friends forever. She's like, if you want to do this, you really need to pursue it and do it. And so from there, I started hitting up different local stations. Now, mind you, I had been out of college for about 8 or 9 years at this point. So I started hitting up local stations like, hey, I want to intern for you guys. And they were like, no, you can't intern for us because you're not in college full time. And so I ended up finding a local broadcasting school called BIM, Broadcasting Institute of Maryland. And I went to that program. It was like a trade school, paid money out of my own pocket to go. And from there, I was able to get my first internship with WJZ in Baltimore. And because I was working my business in the daytime, I was going to school midday. The only department I could intern in was the sports department because that's the only department that stayed open late. So I was cutting tape during basketball season, and luckily I love basketball, so I was cutting tape, working under Mark Viviano at WJZ. And from there, I realized, like, hey, I'm in my mid to late 20s. I'm not a baby. If I'm going to really pursue this broadcasting thing, I'm going to do it. I'm going to do it big. So I only applied to major market stations. One thing about my personality and how I did it, I'm extremely persistent. Like, I don't let people tell me no. Like, no means maybe means yes, and yes means we going to tear the roof off of this thing, right? Right. So you just can't tell me no. And so I just started hitting up all these major markets. I knew it was going to be either New York, LA, Los Angeles, Chicago. Los Angeles, New York, Chicago. Those were the only 3 markets that I applied to. And when I was in broadcasting school, my professors was like, oh, no, Crystal, you're going to have to go to a local market. Nobody goes to the top. I was like, well, I'm number one in my mind, so I'm going to the top. And literally, I pressed the people out so bad at all the networks, but Fox was the one that actually broke and gave the opportunity. And I went in as a production assistant, number one market, number one cable news network. And that's how I got started.
Wow. I kind of want to dive into so we hear the the highlight points of people's stories. And sometimes we think that that was the story, like linear, but there's so many parts in between. I'm kind of curious about that portion when you had finished college and you said you had an English degree, right? And you were teaching in DC, and at that portion, what were you doing to kind of you know where you want to go? You have this vision in your head. You're not quite there yet. What was your mindset like at that point in time?
Well, I had lost it. I won't even lie. I had totally shifted my life to what people thought is predictable or was safe or what you should be doing. And at that point, even though in the back of my mind, I knew I wanted to be like Ananda Lewis from BET, I had no idea how I was going to be able to do that. And so I totally shifted my purpose and my passion to what other people thought my life should be. So I was going to work. I was working a job. I was 21, 22 years old. So I was partying. I had a little money in the bank. I could go to Nordstrom on the weekend and buy some nice boots. You know what I'm saying? I could do all those things, but I was not in the space of still becoming a journalist. But I am a person who is of extreme faith, and I do believe that what is for you, you will always be led back to. And it's just totally up to you if you're going to be obedient enough to actually go back to it and pursue it. So for me, like I said, I left teaching high school, and then I went to law school, even though I never wanted to be a lawyer. And then I came home and I started a business, and that was a trial. That was a very tough point because I didn't really have money like that. Like, you know, these athletes, they pay you sometimes, they wouldn't. Sometimes they felt like it was just a privilege for you to work with them. And so I was really struggling. Like, I mean, it was a point for me, and the reason that led me to the business planning class was I was laying in bed one day, extremely broke. I had a Jaguar. My Jaguar had just gotten repossessed. I was living with my dad for the first time since I was 8 years old. And I picked up my journal that I've been keeping since I was in the 5th grade, right? Wow. And so I pick up this journal and I read those words that I just told you. I want to be like the girl on BET. I wrote it back in my journal when I was 15 years old. And I remember lying in that bed on the verge of like extreme depression, suicidal thoughts, like this can't be my life. And when I read those words, I just broke down in tears. And I was like, well, God, if this is what you have for me and you want me to do, then show me the way, open the door, you know, provide the resource. And in me being obedient enough to listen, when I went into that business plan and development class and my friend came in that day, that's how the story really started. So it started off in a space of confusion, doubt, not following my purpose and my passion, but being obedient enough to have written it down years ago and then revisiting it and then seeing, wow, this is really what you've been called to do, and really walking in the steps, even though they were unpredictable, even though people were like, what the hell are you doing? You were in law school. You have it like, no, why don't you just do what works right now? And I was like, no, like, this is where my heart is. I love to write. I love talking to people. I just have this innate gift to do these things, and just being strong enough to be obedient in that. And so, yeah, I mean, it was a lot of crazy days of just like figuring it out. You know, I remember sitting down at the Enoch Pratt Library, the main one downtown, and I was sitting in there and this is how old I am, God. Jesus. I was sitting in there because like you really couldn't go on the internet and just Google all of this stuff. You know what I'm saying? So I remember sitting in the library reading these big old books about all these different networks and sitting in there for hours and hours and hours a day trying to figure out, well, who was the vice president of this company? How did the company get started? Who could I reach out to? So that's how much I wanted it when I realized that it was time to really pursue it.
Yeah. Wow. I think that piece is so important for so many people to hear, because like they hear all the high points. No, you had to have that clarity come to you. You had to reposition yourself. You had to redirect your vision and your goals and be reminded of, you know, what your vision was. You found out where you kind of got clarity back to where you wanted to go. You got that opportunity when you took that business development class and you interview a Hall of Famer and Ray Lewis. At that point, I'm pretty sure you had that spark of, wow, like that felt so good. This is what I want to keep doing. How did you go about keep doing it? I know you said you put in the work researching and all that stuff, but like, how did you go about staying in that mix, like in the industry, to make sure you had a foot in the door?
It's funny. One of my favorite authors is John C. Maxwell. He's sold over 40 New York Times bestsellers. I've actually had the opportunity to interview him 3 times now, and has actually become a mentor and a friend of mine. And one thing that John says in his book, Intentional Living, he says, nobody gets anywhere by being unintentional. Right. So we could say all day, I want to be a journalist. I want to be an attorney. I want to be, you know, a publicist, a sports therapist, whatever it is that you want to be in life. But you have to be strategically intentional about it, meaning you have to write your plan down, right? Make it very clear, write those SMART goals, specific, measurable, attainable, realistic, and timely. Make sure all your goals have those benchmarks in it, and you have to pursue those things. So for me, one thing was I needed to get an internship, right? I wrote that down. When I realized, okay, well, what's the process of getting an internship after having been out of college so long? Well, when I was calling the stations, they were saying, hey, you need to be in school. I wasn't going back to a 4-year college. I had just left law school. I wasn't spending any more money on college, right? I was like, I'm not doing that. You know, like, that doesn't make sense. And I said, okay, well, what can I do? So I remember, Robin Quivers, who is the co-host of Howard Stern, Black woman from Baltimore, she actually went to BIM. And I remember reading her story years before. And so I was like, dang, I wonder if that school is still around that Robin Quivers went to. So I looked up the school. Boom, still around. Called up the director. And me, I am, and some people might not be comfortable enough in their own self to be this way, but I'm very direct, and I don't like to deal with middlemen. Like, that's not, I don't believe that the middleman is necessary in your journey, right? When you can find the direct contact and just reach out to who it is that you need to be in touch with. And so for me, I reached out to the director of the school. Hey, I need to get in school right now, because I was at the point in my life where I had to make not just life career decisions, but financial grown-up decisions. And it was like, well, I don't have time to be playing games with middlemen and waiting another year. And, because life comes into play, relationships, housing, babies, bills, whatever you want to call it. And so for me, I just reached out to the director of the school. So after I got in there, I knew that the goal in going to the school was to get the internship. Like, I didn't go to school to get the knowledge, because I'd already been to college, right? I already had a 4-year degree. I went to the school to be able to get the internship, because I knew the internship would open the door to the relationships, to the people in the industry where I wanted to be. So, again, looking at the fundamental core things that need to happen in order for you to achieve your goal, writing those things down, putting a timeline on it, and being very intentional about those things. And then you'll make it happen. Like, I also believe that a lot of times people aren't self-aware enough to tap into the fact that failure is going to happen, indecisiveness is going to happen, confusion is going to happen. But if you are, like your title of your show, your vision, right? If you know what your vision is, then you map downwards, right? Like, okay, I want to be a journalist, and you map downwards. So what does that look like? And then you write those things out and put timeline on it, and then just do it. Like, no matter what your circumstance is. Did I come from the worst family? Absolutely not. I had a mom who was strong, that worked very hard to take care of us. But again, I didn't know that we were borderline poor. I didn't know that, when you get to certain places and spaces and time, that people have 2 parents that pay for them to go to college, pay their rent while they're getting an internship at the local station. They have all of these other advantages that I just was not privy to. And so I do think a lot of times we make excuses for not being successful. Is it going to be harder for those who might not have those things? Absolutely. But it's not impossible. And you have to know that and own it if you really want to walk in your true vision.
Wow. I'm so glad you said all of that. Like, you literally just provided a real life case study of exactly what I talked about in episode 81. Go listen to it if you want to. You talk about reverse planning, having that goal, saying what it is, working backwards, putting a time date on it, and figuring out, how do I get there? Like, wow, that was incredible what you just said. And okay, so we're moving along in your journey, and now you got the internship, and you're starting to get those opportunities. You're in the right space now, right? How did you start operating in that space? I know that the media industry, especially being a woman of color, like how that whole thing went, any challenges that happened, how did you, like, because clearly you bossed up. So like, I want to kind of go through that process of what it was like trying to get to where you are now.
Baby, I put on my best $30 wig and $10 dress, and I made it happen. You hear me? Listen, I mean, that's what you got to do. I remember reading Jay-Z's story, him and Dame Dash and Big's story of starting Rockefeller Records, right? And I'm a hip-hop girl from forever. And, what they used to do was they had these Pally jackets that had Rockefeller Records on the back of them. They would rent limousines, and they had a license plate that they would attach to their limos that said Rockefeller Records. And then they would go into the club, and they would pop bottles, and they'd be like, sponsored by Rockefeller Records. They did not have a record label at the time. Okay, they were just starting. These brothers were hood dudes just out here, and they faked it until they made it, right? They had so much buzz as Rockefeller Records before they were this major entity, just by creating the image of we are rappers, we are label owners, and so y'all need to rock with us because we are Rockefeller Records. And I remember reading that story, and I remember walking into my own journey and saying, Crystal, if you want to be a journalist, you need to look like a journalist. You need to talk like a journalist. You need to have facts and knowledge like a journalist. And then people will start to believe that, hey, you are a journalist, but you first have to believe that you're a journalist. And so for me, I never really... Again, I'm crazy. I'm like, I have this level of crazy, faith or whatever, that I know that I can create whatever reality I desire, And so I walked into these spaces looking like, whoever the local anchor is, here in Baltimore that people want to be. And, I went into these different meetings, different engagements, and I always looked the part. You would never see me not act as if I'm not a journalist. I would always be inquisitive. I found some very good mentors, people that were in the business that looked like me, that could give me guidance. And not all of the African American women who are journalists that look like me received me for whatever reason. I can't even really entertain what that was about. But there were very strategic women who I met on my journey who have been in the business for a very long time. One woman who I love to this day, Arthel Neville. I haven't talked to her in a long time, but she helped to start E! Entertainment Television. And I remember coming into Fox, and this woman literally had her wardrobe that she was giving away. And she said, well, you need a tape. And she said, Crystal, go into my office, because she had her whole wardrobe in her office. And she said, pick whatever you want to wear and just take it. And I mean, these are like, $700, $800 suits, beautiful colors and things like that. And, for me in that moment, just her giving me those suits showed me that she believed in me enough to invest in me, And so I realized in that moment that, wow, I do have something unique about me, even if the network isn't giving me the full opportunity that I feel like I deserve, or even if, I see, Becky or whoever getting opportunities that they may not deserve. I just had to focus on me. I had to focus on Crystal and how I was showing up, because I knew I had a goal at hand and a task that I want to accomplish. I always quote Russell Westbrook. I interviewed him before the 2015 All-Star game. And Russell said to me, I'm focused on the task at hand and the goal I want to accomplish. And he said, today I'm going to go out there, and not only am I going to win this game, he's like, but I'm going to be the MVP. And I remember that man saying it, and I remember being in the press box and him achieving that goal. And that always stuck with me, for the last 5 years, because it's been 5 years now since that interview. It's like, if you're focused on the task at hand and the goal that you want to accomplish, the other stuff, it doesn't matter. Like, will it get to you? Yes, but it can't make you or break you. You just have to know that that's a part of your process. And there's a purpose in your process. Like, a lot of people say they want the end goal, right? That they want the prosperity, or they want the big, big thing, but you cannot get there without going through the process. And everybody's process is different. A lot of times in industries like media, we always look at, what this person has at the end. And it's like, you never know what that person had to go through and or sacrifice to get where they are. So don't ever look for somebody else's life or want somebody else's life, because you don't know what they went through to get where they are. And so I don't even remember the question at this point, but
No,
I hope
yeah.
I answered it.
Yeah, I just talked about that, what the process was for you to kind of get to where you are now. And like, you got your foot in the door, you were in the space, but now you got to put in the work, right?
Yeah, man.
Yeah.
I mean, even with that, like, putting in the work is so real. Like, I had such a learning curve because I had never worked in like a local station. I had only interned at a local station, and I went to the #1 market at a cable news network. So we're not just doing local news. We were doing national news, international news, global. And I would have to come in. Now, mind you, I already had to be to work at 4:30 in the morning. I would come in an hour and a half early just to read in, just so I could be caught up and up to speed, because I did not have the knowledge base. And see, this is what people don't understand. Or I would have to leave work at, when I got off at 1 p.m., go home, and then come back into the city and then do a late night event and network and be on my grind until 10 p.m. and then have to be back up the next morning at 3:30, And so, like, that's the kind of stuff that, because a lot of times once we get in the door, then we get lazy, then we get complacent, and it's like, no, you're here to make this thing work. And so it's going to be long hours, but you have to realize that at the end of the day, the work that you put in is going towards that vision, and you can't get to the full vision doing things halfway. And so that's also part of the process.
Yeah. It's so incredible kind of seeing, like, I find it so interesting to hear stories about things that happen and you were kind of there, but you like don't know, like, okay, let's say like for you said you did that interview with Russell Westbrook during the All-Star. I remember that All-Star game so vividly. I remember exactly where I was, what I was doing when he dropped all those points in that All-Star game. And like, I was like, man, this dude Russell is going crazy. And now that I think about, like, okay, I'm here talking to you now in 2019. That was back in 2015. And you were there interviewing him, and who would have thought that I would be interviewing you? Like, I just think about that. It's like so crazy. Like, you don't know who's where in their story at that point in time in your life. Like, it's so interesting to me. And I kind of want to know, I feel like it may be a story behind, well, I know it's a story behind it, but kind of see if there's some details that we could possibly get into if you're comfortable with it, about how you got to Fox. Like, how did you, like, that's huge. Like, wow. And I just want to know, like, was there a process of doing that? And if so, like, how did you do it?
My process was so untraditional. Like, I literally, when I tell you, I picked up the phone and called the woman in HR every single day. But I did that for every network, right? And it's interesting, but you are always going to end up where you're supposed to be. So people can say what they want to say about Fox News. It's fine. I get it, right? But at the end of the day, they had a diversity initiative at the network where they were looking for minorities to come into the company because minorities just didn't want to work there, right? And so, and I'm not saying other companies don't have those kinds of initiatives, but this one was very strategic. We were actually mentored by the CEO of the company. 4 of us were picked per year. And so when I was reaching out, they knew I was a woman of color. They knew that I was passionate about it. They just didn't know where to put me. And so when the right opportunity opened up and I called again that one day, the one woman just said, Crystal, just come for an interview. And I remember catching the train from Baltimore to New York 5 times to interview with Fox. And my final interview was a phone interview with the VP up there at the time. He's no longer at the company. He called me. We had a 2-hour phone interview, and that's how I got in the door. So, I mean, again, we also have to know that where we're supposed to be might not be where we think we want to be, you know, but because of me being there, I had so many opportunities in that diversity program where I met the CEOs of, I'm talking about Dunkin' Donuts, Goya, all of these major decision makers in the country participated in this program. So not only was I able to go into the company, I was able to make the company work for me. And so a lot of times we have to really look for opportunities where we can maximize our potential, right? So yeah, I could go to somewhere where there's a sea of Black women, but then am I the unicorn in the room, right? And because I know that I want to use my uniqueness as my advantage, I'm going to go and capitalize and get whatever I need from wherever I am, and I'm going to take it where I want to go. A lot of people aren't willing to do that. I mean, and I know I give a lot of hip hop references, but I think about Puffy. Puffy would catch the train from DC to Uptown, DC to Sony Records, you know, as an intern, not making any money, right? And then he had to go into a space where he was working as A&R, but he wasn't necessarily doing what he wanted to do. But guess what? When the opportunity presented itself, he pitched Uptown Records to Clive Davis, and Clive Davis said yes. But imagine if he had said, no, I'm not going to go to that company because I don't want to take the train there every day. It's not convenient for me, right? Or they're not paying me enough money, or there are not enough Black people in the room, then he would have never been in the room long enough to have that kind of relationship with Clive Davis to where he could create Uptown. It's just like me. I was at Fox. Every Black person that came into the newsroom, from Tony Dungy to Trey Songz to Nick Cannon, they were like, well, somebody needs to interview them. Send them to Crystal, right? You know, and literally that's how my podcast evolved. It goes out to 1,300 stations nationwide. You know, my VP was like, well, what do we do with this content? I said, hey, I can make it into my own podcast. He said, okay, we'll create it. And that's what I did. But if I had not been in that room at Fox News, I wouldn't have been able to get that opportunity. So one thing that I always encourage people to do is go into spaces and places that make you feel uncomfortable, because those are the places that will challenge you the most. If you're always comfortable in an environment, you're not meeting your fullest potential. And so go and get what you need to get where you need to get it. Learn from the best of the best. At the end of the day, Fox News is number one. Been number one for 16 seasons. So if I'm at the number one network, that means I'm meeting the number one people that are coming through the news industry. I'm learning from the number one producers, directors, writers, journalists. And at the end of the day, I can take that to where I plan to go on my end destination. And so I always encourage people to go into these non-traditional spaces and make it happen for yourself.
Yeah. Wow. And I love asking this question to every person I have on the show. And I know that your answer is going to blow me out the water as well. So if you had a billboard sponsored by Crystal Berger or Fox, but I'd rather be sponsored by you directly.
That's right.
What, and everybody that went down this boulevard, this street, whatever it is, what would be the message that you would want them to read on that billboard?
Surround yourself with purpose on purpose in order to start living your purpose. It's very plain and simple. I say that all the time. Put yourself around people that are living on purpose, right? And be intentional and purposeful about it so you can tap into your purpose. A lot of times we're surrounded by the wrong people. Our environment determines so much of how far we go. If you want to be that, take yourself into a space that makes you uncomfortable. Be intentional about it and be around purposeful people that are living the life that you desire. And then you'll see your life transform into the life that you desire.
Wow. I love that. All right. I hope you enjoyed that episode with Crystal. Man, that was so good. That was so real. I hope you learned something. If you didn't learn something, you just need to go listen back because there's so much information in there that I know you could hold on to and just learn from her experience and her story and take that and apply it to your life. The main thing I got from what Crystal said was you just got to be intentional. And it was so amazing because Crystal perfectly employed episode 81, which I referred to in the episode. Then you should go back and listen to it too, called Reverse Planning. She established exactly what her vision was and worked backward to get there. She got into a specific school to get a specific internship to apply to a top network to become a journalist, which was her dream. And she was intentionally strategic and was not afraid to put herself out there and be uncomfortable for a little while to achieve her goal and her vision. Sometimes it's going to take us being a little uncomfortable, or maybe sometimes a lot uncomfortable, to get where we want to go. And I got that from what Crystal said in this episode as well. If you enjoyed her vision story, if you enjoyed this episode, if you enjoyed this show, please give a 5-star rating in iTunes. I would greatly appreciate it. It helps the show so much. And if you have not already subscribed, if you want to get more stories like this, you just need to subscribe so you get notified when a show comes out every single week. I will talk to you guys again next week, but until then, as always, keep building your vision every single day.